Well, thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry, I'm in a chair that I realize is a little bit noisy. So hopefully that won't be too distracting. It'll probably only distract me. But let's start kind of like we have been, setting our motivation. And just being quiet for a few minutes. Fully arriving here in this space. And bring to mind the highest reason that we have for sharing this time together. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do the refuge prayer. I know we haven't been starting with that, but I would say that even for someone maybe who doesn't consider themselves a Buddha, if they're Buddhist, if they are looking for help and coming to Buddha's teachings for that, that's a form of refuge. So hopefully not too uncomfortable. And I'll say it once in Tibetan just for the imprint and then English. Sangye chodang suki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. I just did a dedication prayer. Because I was thinking dedication. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The positive potential that I create by practicing giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. So welcome. Tonight I thought, as I had shared before, that starting with renunciation, bodhicitta, last week having a conversation about wisdom of emptiness, that a great way to sort of end the series would be to talk about Lojong and kind of some of the methods for training our minds. And I started these 4 weeks saying, all of Buddhist methods are really about becoming our own therapist. It's really about training our mind, and there's very specific kind of techniques to help us to do that. And two of the things that I think are most powerful for me, and I think given that they've been taught by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and so many other great masters, I think in this lineage, really powerful tools. And some of my favorite teachings. One is called 8 Verses of Training the Mind. And these Lojong teachings initially were not taught openly. They were taught in very intimate, small circles. And the reason there was because they are, I would say, kind of radical. And they did not want people to hear them and misinterpret them and then develop a disrespect for the teachings. And this particular teaching was initially one of the great Kadampa masters, Geshe Langri Tangpa, who was a student of Geshe Potawa, who is one of the great Kadampa masters. He taught this, and then later on, these teachings were heard by Geshe Chekawa, who was so inspired and really, I'm not sure, frankly, I should be sure if it's the first commentary on these, but helped to spread these really precious teachings. And I'm going to just kind of go through and read the 8 verses first, and then talk about them a little bit, and maybe you'll understand why they might have been something that was kept secret, and why people might misunderstand them. So I'll read them. So the first verse is, by thinking of all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel for accomplishing the highest aim, I will always hold them dear. The next verse is, I'm just going to read them and I won't say the next verse. Whenever I'm in the company of others, I will regard myself as the lowest among all, and from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. In every action, I will watch my mind, and the moment destructive emotions arise, I will confront them strongly and avert them, since they will hurt both me and others. Whenever I see ill-natured beings or those overcome by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I'd found a priceless treasure. Whenever someone out of envy does me wrong by attacking or belittling me, I will take defeat upon myself and offer the victory to others. Even when someone I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes and trust mistreat me unjustly, I will view that person as a true spiritual teacher. In brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. I will learn to keep these practices untainted by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns, and may I recognize all things as illusion and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. So those are the 8 verses, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of go through them one by one. I think they get a little more radical as we go, and maybe they're not. Maybe all of you have been exposed to so many teachings that this is the kind of thinking that you're very accustomed to. But I'm sure you can imagine that upon hearing them for the first time, without some kind of an explanation, it could be a little bit jarring and easily misunderstood. So, thinking of all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel for accomplishing the highest aim, highest goals, meaning enlightenment, I will always hold them as dear and precious. So, more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So in Buddhism, there's often this idea of a wish-fulfilling jewel. And there was a time when, people would think about or talk about, being able to find some magical jewel that could grant all of your wishes. And this analogy, the reason all sentient beings more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel are because if we had a wish-fulfilling jewel, we would not know what to wish for. We would not wish for the things that would actually be the causes of happiness. We would wish for something else. And even if we think of enlightenment as that being the thing that we would wish for, the reality is enlightenment is so much better than we could ever even imagine. But then why other beings more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel? So it is with other beings, the 2 collections that we try to accumulate as Buddhists, which are merit and wisdom, right? So the virtuous deeds that we do that ultimately end up as the cause of a body of a Buddha. And then the wisdom that we try to realize and acquire. Hard to say the word acquire in that sense, but to realize, become the mind of a Buddha. So these are the beings who facilitate that. They provide the opportunity for us to actually practice. So that's one thing, which is, it is only through others through others that we are able to practice Dharma, that we're able to practice the perfections. Think about patience, generosity, all of morality, all of these things are in relation to other sentient beings. So they truly are the ground for all of the planting of the karmic seeds that we want to plant. It is with other sentient beings. And the other thing, and His Holiness in his commentary really points out that we are just, and we talked about this, I think, very briefly before, I am just one sentient being. Other sentient beings are countless. There are just so many of them. So of course, they should be more important than just me, just this individual one. And so really developing that mind that holds others dear, that really understands, has wisdom enough to understand that it is with and through others that we achieve any of our goals for happiness, and especially those ultimate goals of enlightenment. So that's the first verse. And I think the logic of that makes sense and goes down easily. They get harder. Next one is a little harder, maybe. Whenever I'm in the company of others, I will regard myself as lowest among all, and from the depths of my heart, I will cherish others as supreme. So this idea of being lowest of all, we're not talking about, low self-esteem. And we've kind of talked, again, very briefly, because this time whizzes by. The ego, even with low self-esteem, it's all being kind of focused on me. The difference here is seeing ourselves as lowest of all doesn't mean that we're low. What it really means is that we're open to being able to learn and be taught by others. It's arrogance more, really blocks the door to gaining any kind of wisdom, right? When we think we know it all, and in fact, a good disciple, they say, coming to the teachings, the pot, you want the pot to not have any holes, and you want it to be clean, right? It's the motivation, it's the mind that we're coming to the teachings with. So in that sense, understanding that there is something, first of all, that we can learn from others, but also that others are, again, providing this opportunity for us. So in that sense, cherishing them, respecting them, it's not the low self-esteem that we typically think of in the West. So, I'll pause. I don't know if that might be worthy of more discussion, or I'll move on if nobody wants to kind of comment or.
Bonnie, I think the second one, for those of us who come from Christian traditions, is very similar to the words of Jesus, where he says you should be the servant of all. But I like what you said, because in that case, it's about putting yourself as the servant of all. But in Buddhism, it's about allowing yourself to be taught by all. And they're both allowing others to be, and again, it's not superior to me, but it's allow them to help direct me, but for really, in really different ways and for really different purposes.
Yeah, but I think related, right? I mean, I think, who knows what an enlightened mind is trying to get us to, right? It's always like with whatever ears I hear. Sometimes I feel now like, oh, I can hear things that, from a Western Christian tradition now with Buddhist ears, and they seem to make sense. Probably that's heretical to someone who's, hardcore Christian. I don't know. But to me, I think, it's pointing us in the same kind of direction. And again, this idea that we can be receivers of wisdom and the benefit that they're giving us. So, humility leaves us open to that, and arrogance really just closes the door. So, yeah, so I do hear a lot of the resonance of, Christian teachings here as well. A little bit different, I think it's the Buddhist wisdom, frankly, that makes the big difference for me. The next one I think is not problematic in every action, but it's a real to take to heart. In everything I do, I am going to watch my mind, and the minute a destructive emotion, the minute a negative mind arises, when those negative thoughts arise, I am going to strongly confront them and avert them, because that is what hurts me and others. And I think, again, I can only speak from my experience, but to set that determination, because I don't know about you, but there have been times, and I think I shared one in this class where, I was having a pity party for myself. The mental afflictions were running. They're running when you're not happy. That's the litmus test. But sometimes it's almost like we want to engage in that crazy train. We want to, hop aboard like a hobo. I'm going for the ride. And this is, just remembering. And I love reciting these verses and thinking about these verses and getting commentaries on them, because it really digs in what we need to be doing to achieve our real ends here. And so, making that determination that I'm not going to jump on the crazy train, that I'm going to say, hey, wait a minute, stop. This is your selfishness. This is your self-centeredness, and bring ourselves back to that reality. I did mention, and I don't remember if it was when we were talking about bodhicitta and compassion, how this is something that, so with a good Dharma friend, to really be compassionate, you're not cramming the Dharma, roughly down their throats, right? You maybe meet them where they are and like, okay, I understand that you're feeling hurt, or I understand that you're feeling angry. And, the relative reality of whatever their situation is, giving them some understanding, and then gently, bringing them back to the teachings that we share, reminding them of karma and emptiness, reminding them of their vows, gently. Here, though, we're saying, okay, that's what we do with a friend. That's what we do with someone else, gently. But with ourselves, we're going to, I would say, develop that. So what these Kadampa masters were really hardcore practitioners, right? So they're like, I'm going to be a true warrior. I'm going to have a zero tolerance policy, right, for mental afflictions, and I'm not going to indulge. And it's so crazy that it feels like an indulgence, because it's not indulging. It's actually just harming. So making that strong determination, and then understanding that those mental afflictions harm me. They don't help me. They harm me and they harm others. Ultimately, there's nothing good to be found, even so. A lot of times in the West, this idea of like anger can be constructive. The truth is, there are situations where you can look and see like, okay, something wrong is happening here, but we don't have to be angry. This is the trick with Buddhism. It's like all of these things that are virtuous are due to ignorance, are intertwined with negative things, right? Like love is intertwined with this unhealthy attachment. The wisdom that understands that something is wrong, there's an injustice and it's harming others, can be like intertwined with anger. So part of what we are doing on this path, and hopefully helping each other to do, is to sort of decouple and unwind those things, so that we can actually take what's helpful and get rid of the stuff that's not helpful. They don't have to go together, even though it seems like that, because that's what our experience is. And then the test with anger is, what is this, when I'm feeling, if I feel like people are being wrong, where is my selfishness? And that's what we have to find. Where is my identity, my self-cherishing, my selfishness? Even when it looks like we're defending others, where is my ego, participating in that? And unraveling that and understanding. And when we do that, then we are able to approach still, maybe taking an action, maybe taking a firm action. One of the great analogies here is parenting. Now there's parents who are just angry too, okay? But we know when we're being good parents, right? When we're our highest self showing up, then we can discipline without anger, right? Because it truly is about them and it's not about us. So understanding that, decoupling that, because it harms us and it harms them. The next one kind of related, and maybe I should pause again. I don't know. Somebody just kind of chime in if you, I don't want to rattle on. The next one, when I see ill-natured beings who are overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I found a precious, priceless treasure. So on this path, many of us have taken vows to, bodhisattva vows to try to help other living beings. And then when someone shows up, the nastier someone is, in front of us, it's almost, it can be very much like, well, and it's not like we're consciously like leaving them out, but it's like, oh, that's not what I'm talking about. I want to be nice to the other people who are nice. I want to be nice to other people who have the same values that I do. When you meet someone who is, the most, if you could think of the most rotten person that you've ever met or could imagine meeting, what can we say about them that we can know from a Buddhist perspective, that we can definitively know? Well, actually, not a lot. There's a couple of things we could say. Either they are under incredible amount of suffering and ignorance. They are suffering from so much delusion, and the negative things that they are doing are going to cause so much harm to them. That is a person who truly does deserve our kindness and compassion. Someone who is looking, and we talked about it in little ways, the nasty person, pounding on their horn, giving someone the finger on the road, that person is suffering. They wouldn't be doing that if, happy people don't do that. But the other thing we could say about them, so either that is the case, or they really are a priceless treasure. Well, in both cases, they'd be a priceless treasure, or they are an enlightened being who is showing up at the perfect opportunity for us, to help us to demonstrate and practice patience, because we absolutely have to practice patience in order to achieve the enlightened body. So it is either a person who is really suffering under extreme delusion and ignorance, or it's an enlightened being showing up as a person who's suffering in order to provide us with an opportunity to practice. And then I would say, which is it? Both, neither, either, and does it matter? From a Buddhist perspective, like we have to kind of get used to that. It could be either. It could be both. But the other nice thing, I had one teacher say, they are like a priceless treasure, and they become rarer and rarer as you develop yourself on the path. And I think that's really true. You start, shake your head. There's always exceptions until we reach the final goal. There's always going to be exceptions. But I would say for the most part, is it that the world is changing, or is it that my mind is changing? And then does it matter, right? It's a method that we can practice and see the actual results. So, treat those people like a precious treasure. And the next two start to get, I think, a little harder. They're the same sort of mindset, but a little more challenging. When someone out of jealousy or anger does me wrong by attacking or belittling me, I will take the defeat upon myself and offer the victory to others. So this is a hard one. And again, His Holiness says, if you are looking to help others, then you don't offer the victory, right? We have to use our wisdom. You wouldn't offer the victory to someone who is harming others, right? This is really, but from our perspective, what happens when someone criticizes me, my ego comes up for sure. And it's a little bit like, being the lowest of all. it's an opportunity to kind of look like, well, what is there truth in what they're saying? Is there truth in their experience, and how is that? And then not sort of struggling against that. It doesn't mean, so we actually have vows. You can't, if someone says something about you that's not true, then you need to say that's not true. But it's not something to struggle against and fight for, and you just do what you can do without doing anything negative, to sort of say that's not correct. But offering the victory to others is not always having to be right, not always arguing, and then feeling what happens to me as coming from, and this takes a little bit of faith, but hopefully intelligent faith that's informed, understanding karma and understanding emptiness. When negative things are happening, understanding that that could not have happened had I not created somehow the causes for that. And so I'm now exhausting that, rather than creating more of it, right, by engaging in some kind of like arguing back and forth and fighting for something, kind of just letting something go, kind of can stop that karma. And then, I accept that I've created the causes for this, and now I'm experiencing this result, and may I experience this so that no one else has to, so that at some point all living beings will be free from this. So, I think I'm, I've at various times really tried this verse in particular, I have tried to practice. I think, it's very interesting though. It's about learning our minds, right? Really becoming our own therapist, really understanding how our minds work. I could be so sincere and really inspired and like, okay, this person is, and actually this goes for the next verse and this verse. But I'm gonna offer the victory, and I'm gonna be, and we got to be careful here, I'm gonna be the bigger person. Oh gosh, so now I become like the arrogant bigger person because I'm a spiritual practitioner and I'm gonna offer you the victory, right? Like, no, that, no. But I've been that person. I've been there before where, I'm trying sincerely, but then it's tainted again, intertwined with these negative things, tainted with this idea like I'm the bigger person. But I think, the true test, like how well I'm doing something like this is, okay, so I bake a cake for the person who, did something, whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. I try to figure out what I've done. And we talked about this before, when you're doing 4 powers of purification, I know that I've done something like this. How can I know it? Because I'm experiencing a similar result. So it's proof. It's a kind of proof that I've done something. So it's not like when I'm coming from that mindset, it's not like I'm manufacturing the victory. I'm actually acknowledging, like, you know what, you're right. So bake a cake and go knock on the door and, thanks, I really appreciate you, it helped me, whatever, see something that I was doing. And then the person is just nasty again, or says, yeah, I knew that you were whatever, and then gives you another bit. Those are the times when you see like, oh, how much am I really, am I able to do this? What's my real ability? Where is my mind? So even just trying to practice these things, we get insight about ourselves, about what is truly motivating us and what is truly going on. And when we know that, then we can actually start to like change things so that it works better for us and for others. Okay, I love the next one. Oh, please.
For me, these three verses are interesting because, and I'm not going to say that the punchline is ever easy, right? It's not easy to say that I found this priceless treasure, or to offer the victory to somebody else, or to look at them as my true spiritual teacher. But a lot of people talk about the near enemy and the far enemy. And to me, the far enemy, somebody who's just blatantly in my face, it's easier for me to at least recognize that I need to take a step back But that near enemy, the person who just comes on and just kind of, the Debbie Downer, oh, I'm just having a bad day. And that, I find that harder. I find that,
Yeah.
I find it harder, number one, just to catch myself to say, hey, you need to treat this as somebody who is really precious, right? I just want to say,
Yeah.
for it. Get over it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a lot more subtle. So for me, that subtlety is harder for me to catch myself and remind myself that I need to be in the same place, as opposed to somebody who's in my face, blatantly flipping
Yes.
up and telling me, whatever, right?
Yes. Yes. No, right on. We are not living in an age of nuance, and what makes these so radical is the subtle things that we find out about ourselves, right? The subtle ways that they play out. To your point, and I think I may have said it in this, in this class, but before, I've thought there have been times, not constantly since I've become a Buddhist, but there have been times when I was like, gosh, if I could get nailed to a cross, like I do that. Like, let's get it over with. Let's do it. What, a week, whatever. Like, I think, and I know maybe that again sounds sacrilegious, but I feel like there are times where maybe we could muster that up, right? But no, instead, what do I have to do? I have to deal with 24/7, all the little things, right? And as you practice, the really nasty people kind of disappear from your life, or maybe they're just somebody on the television. They seem so imaginary, right? They're just so far removed. But it's the subtle it's the little things, right? It's the constant low level radiation. And that's a spiritual warrior who goes after that. To me, that's deserving of something. 20 some years ago, as a new Buddhist, I left everything and left everything. Like I had, billions to leave. Not like that, but I decided I wanted to like really put myself in, steep myself in spiritual teachings and the Dharma. And so I moved to a Buddhist center, and I just got real with myself. Like it was still me that was there. Like I wasn't able to hop over spiritual levels because I went and lived in a Dharma center. Suddenly I wasn't able to do these things. And I remember having thoughts like, oh, wow, I had insight, and I'm like, oh, I'll never have gossip again. I can't even imagine, being in a working environment and having those stupid conversations. And sure enough, I ended up having a regular job eventually. And for a while, I was maybe even kind of an inspiring person to be in that environment. And then after a while, right back, and hopefully with progress, not as bad as before. But seeing it and then kind of just being like, oh, repulsed by the reality of where I am. But it's that, yeah. It's like, yeah, the big things we can handle. Nail me to a cross. But geez, don't be rude to me. Don't do the stupid little things, right? That's the stuff that we have a harder time with. So I think, yeah, there's real wisdom in that observation.
For a long time, I tried to match energy with energy. I was a police officer for 20 years. And so when somebody would come at me with that, chaotic, angry energy, I would throw it back. Well, that gets really, really exhausting. So for me, yeah, I no longer have to deal with that. I don't have to do that anymore. My peace is not worth that.
Well, it's so hard, and I think especially in a job like that, like sometimes it's interesting. I think, of course, and we do have many lives to live, but if we could carry the wisdom into the next life, right? Like, what would it be like to be in the same position you were in, but with more wisdom another time, right? So then maybe you're there and you're manifesting. It looks like you have that kind of energy so it can function maybe, but like what's happening to you inside could be very different, right?
I call that being seasoned.
Pardon?
Right, being seasoned, sprinkling just the right amount.
Yeah. So, sometimes it's helpful, like, right? With small children, I feel sometimes to see our displeasure. So, but it's almost like an actor, like, you have to like get the mean face and your tone changes a little bit. And it sends a message that helps them, but you're not necessarily feeling angry, right? It's a signal to them because they're not subtle. Little kids are not subtle. So like, I'm not happy with you, doesn't necessarily, they don't understand the ramifications of like, you do this and other people will be upset. So to help them, we might manifest in a certain way. But we don't have to feel that way inside, right? But again, I say hats off. That's a challenging, like you had the big challenging stuff. And here we are saying how that's easy. I hope with a grain, right? It's not easy. Like those kinds of situations are not easy at all. And especially like stressful, life and death situations. But I think, for most of us, for short periods of time, we could maybe even do better in some of those situations than just the daily stuff that happens, respond more responsibly. The next verse is, when someone I've helped or in whom I've placed great hopes mistreats me very unjustly. I love that, different translations, but I love the very unjustly. I will view that person as a true spiritual teacher. I think we all have had experience where there's an intimacy and a trust, where we've shown up for someone else in the best way that we could, and then we're betrayed. And that is a special kind of pain that I think is really challenging to deal with. And so then here, just saying, to think that person is a true spiritual teacher. So what does that mean? So again, all of this is, related. We want to practice those things that are going to bring happiness to ourselves and others. We're on this path to attain some kind of wisdom and understanding of reality. And then, here's someone we care for, we've done things for, and they're harming us. How and why could we think of that person as a spiritual, as our holy guru, as our best spiritual teacher? I'm giving a minute in case anyone wants to chime in, but so again, they're providing us with that opportunity to practice, right? And they're also doing another thing. They are showing us where the virtue we've done has been tainted by 8 worldly dharmas. So, I talked before about like these subtle motivations, like 8 worldly concerns or 8 worldly dharmas, wanting to be liked, not wanting to be disliked, wanting a reputation a certain way, all of those things that are very subtly polluting even the good things that we're doing. So, and I use examples. You do something very nice, you go, we can do the same action. We both go to visit someone in the hospital who's sick. To anyone else around, it looks like we're doing the same action. So probably I'm not going to go just because like, oh, I want to look good. Again, if it was that obvious, we could get over it. We could change that. But it's a subtle thing. So I go, maybe I'm going genuinely 100% because I think it's going to help that person and comfort them. And that's the reason I'm there 100%. Sometimes though, I don't really want to be there. And I'm not really just there for them. I'm worried about, this is a friend who's done good things for me. And now if I don't go, what are other people going to think of me? Or what is she going to think of me? and it's involved in my reputation now, right? It's all mixed up. So how do I find, as I'm looking at my mind, I'm meditating, I'm going to teachings, I'm contemplating, I'm really watching my motivation and asking myself, why am I doing things? But again, it's incredibly subtle. It's that low level radiation. So now when I've done something for someone else and they dare not to repay it, not only do they not repay it, they give me the opposite. They betray me. Now I have an opportunity to really see what my motivation was. Because there is definitely, why does it hurt more when someone that we've done something for hurts us? And again, I've already said, when we're feeling unhappy, it's a clue to look for the mental affliction, look for the ignorance that is and again, I hope I have made it so clear. I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying we're bad people or anything to denigrate us. It's about trying to be perfect, right? That thing that the world would tell us is not even a reasonable goal. On this path, that's really what we're looking to do. We're looking to find those little corners of our mind that are selfish, self-centered, ignorant, not working, and change them, gently with ourselves. Okay, these verses aren't so gentle. These verses are when you're feeling good and you want to be a warrior, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to focus on this for a while, see how I do, and then it might be too hard, and then you might have to be a little more gentle with yourself. So the minute that someone betrays me, now it's a different kind of pain. And why is that? Why is that? We have to look, we have to examine why I expected something different from them. Why? What was it an exchange? Was my kindness and love, was it actually, was it a transaction? And again, not being hard on ourselves, like if someone betrays you and you're hurt, by the way, there's times when, although I actually think when the poop hits the fan, these are really great teachings, like dig in. But that's after a while of practicing and hearing them and kind of having my own rudimentary understanding of them. It might be too much. You hear these things at the wrong time, it could be really challenging. And that's why, again, they were kind of kept more secret, because someone could hear them and just disrespect them, like that's nonsense. But if you are looking to understand your mind, think back, go back in your life and think about times that you've been betrayed. It's happened to all of us. What was going on with you? And is it true? And don't take my word for it. Like, was there selfishness involved? Did I have ulterior motives? Was it really a transaction? Was I purely giving something? Ask yourself, right? We don't have to answer to anyone else. It's really, it's for ourselves. Yeah, so I think that's a challenging one, but now I think we're moving into another level, which is this level of looking for the 8 worldly concerns and looking for where even our virtuous deeds are slightly polluted and tainted with them. So that's a tip off. In brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers and secretly take upon myself all of their hurt and suffering. So directly and indirectly is exactly what it says. So directly would be offering help. Again, Master Shantideva says, start with carrots and potatoes. Start when you're offering to the Buddha, when you're setting up your altar, start with water. It's easy to give, and then develop a habit of being generous, right? So offer help directly, the kind of help that you can do. And sometimes it is, if all you can offer is a kind word or a smile, again, the idea is to do something that you can do happily, not regret, because regretting is, one of those 4 ways that we, poop on a good karma, right? We destroy bad karmic seeds that way. We put a dent in the good ones that way too. So not regretting, something that we can do in a sustained way, happily. So directly helping other living beings. Indirectly is what the next thing that I want to do tonight, which is going to be doing a Tonglen practice, a practice of giving and receiving. So, taking upon ourselves all of the suffering and offering all of the happiness to them. That's a meditation. And so doing that, that's something that others don't know that we're doing on them, unless we tell them, which would be very, very weird. I did Tonglen on you yesterday. Although I will say I had teachings on, I might have told you this, so I'm sorry if I'm redundant. I had teachings on Tonglen the first time, and I actually had a good friend who was really, really suffering and came to stay with me. And I thought, okay, well, I can't sleep. So all night I just did this Tonglen practice. And the next day he said to me, I feel so good today. I feel like all the negativity was sucked right out of me. And I was so delighted with myself. I was like, it worked, of course. But, we get those little things that help us along the way. So offering the happiness to them and taking on the suffering is a practice. But the reality is, the truth is, we can't take someone else's suffering. And, from a Buddhist perspective, the proof of that is we're suffering. If the Buddhists could take away our suffering, they'd have ultimate compassion. We would not be suffering. It is the proof of the fact that a Buddha can take away suffering, the fact that we're experiencing. So, but what we're doing when we're turning our minds like that and doing a meditation like that, it's interesting. We are helping all living beings by doing it. We're not able to directly take away their suffering, but we're taking away our own. We're working on our own minds, which means we show up in the world in a different way that is less harmful and beneficial. And then the more we practice, the more we understand, the more we develop realizations, achieve enlightenment, then we can truly benefit others. So that's verse 7. And then the last verse, I will learn to keep all these practices untainted by the thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. And may I recognize all things as illusion, and free from attachment, gain freedom from bondage. So it's like, do all these things without the 8 worldly dharmas, without the 8 worldly concerns, and recognize that things are illusion, and then without attachment, gain freedom. So those are the 8 verses. I will make a recommendation. So there are teachings on Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives around 8 verses. His Holiness just recently did a commentary on them. It was actually even on Zoom, so digest that. And then there's several different publications out there with commentaries. Just wonderful, wonderful teachings. And I think something to pull out. So when I was in Austin and invited a lot of teachers, this was often the topic I would ask them to teach on, because I think it's incredibly valuable. And then another thing that we won't talk about here, but there's another teaching which I just want to mention because I think it's beautiful. And if you're feeling strong, like a spiritual warrior, and the poop hits the fan, I recommend sit down and read Wheel of Sharp Weapons. It's kind of like poetry. Obviously, you could sit and meditate and contemplate it, but simply to recite with like a courageous heart. I'll give you the gist. It's basically, when this crappy thing happens to me, may I remember the cause of it was this kind of crappy thing that I had done, right? And now it's coming back on me. So it's really like digging into, the idea of karma. Like when this happens, may I remember that this is the reason. And then there's a tantric deity, Yamantaka, which is like the wrathful aspect, if you know Manjushri, like a wrathful aspect of wisdom. And this poetry, this teaching is, okay, you Montago, wisdom, trample the head of my selfish concern, slaughter the beast, the enemy, my real enemy, which is self-cherishing and self-grasping. Like, and that's kind of the point of this body of teachings, is understanding the enemy. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, there's a book called Transforming Problems into Happiness. And it's recognize that the enemy is the self-cherish, the thing that we, like, I'm trying to protect me, and that, and again, with wisdom, being gentle with ourselves. But that self-cherishing, that self-grasping is really the thing that's harming us. And recognizing that requires so much wisdom, so much spiritual courage. But if we can do that, when we do that, to the extent that we do that, we can really be there for others. We can really be present, just in our normal, long before enlightenment. A person who's even trying a little bit to practice these things shows up in the world in a different way, like really available to help others. Okay, that felt a little like a soapbox, but I promise it's incredibly inspiring. So I recommend that. So now, time goes so fast. And I do talk a lot. I'm sorry. I would like to pause because I think that's a lot to digest. And I hope you sense that I really welcome, question, or, hey, that doesn't seem to make sense, or maybe the way I explained it was crappy. I'm open to anything.
When you were talking about trampling, were you talking about the original translation into English of the Wheel of Sharp Weapons? It's on the, where it says, trample and dance and tear out the heart of the butcher and stop me.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, because I heard the newer translation several times, and I actually like it's very poetic, but it's really much more moving to me. And I usually don't like poetry.
No, I love it. So I actually have, I have like a very old, like, Tibetan works and archives, like one of the original translations. I think John Landau worked on it, well, with a bunch of other people. FPMT, many FPMT people worked on that one as well. There've been a few, but like, yeah, I find it incredibly poetic and inspiring. And when I just feel like I want to put on my big girl pants and go to town, like, when I've been really heartbroken before, I'm like, okay, this is it. And not understanding that that's the enemy is what's causing me so much suffering, so when you can dig in on that. But I love that you've heard it, like, trample, stomp. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, for anybody who wants it, it's actually on the Alex Berzin site, Study Buddhism, and he actually has it published there. Because
that's fantastic.
Yeah, because with John, Alex was also, those two guys were two of the people who did the original translation, and they tried to be, they're always trying to be as mindful as they can of what the verses mean, but they came up with this really poetic way of doing it, and it's just awesome.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'll have to go and check out that translation. I wonder if it's the same as the one of the ones that I'm familiar with. So I appreciate everyone's time. I want us to do a little, and forgive me, I'm going to turn off the my timer, and I will try not to go over too much, but I really want to do a nice Tonglen meditation. Again, I promise I won't go over too much, and I'm sorry that I didn't parse out my time well enough, but if you could just settle in. And try to bring to mind, after the 8 verses, maybe let's bring to mind someone who we feel has harmed us. and think about that person. Think about their suffering and struggles. Think about all the ignorance and suffering that you know about. And then all the other problems that, whether you were aware of them or not, you know they must have had. All of us. Even the fact that someday they'll die. Like all the pain, sickness, all of the things that come along with being a human being. And allow yourself to really feel compassion. A wish to be able to take away all of their suffering. And then when you're really feeling that genuine wish to be able to take their suffering away, just stop for 1 minute and think about something that you said or done or thought that really represents to you your own selfishness. And imagine that selfishness is like a little hard ball in your heart. And it's black. And imagine that it has the power of every selfish, ignorant thought you've ever had, every action that you regret. And understand that is the enemy. It's what harms you. And it's what's harmed this person that you're meditating on. It's the same enemy. And allow yourself to feel the power of that selfishness and ignorance, that hard ball at your heart. And now decide that you want to take on all the suffering for the person you're meditating on. You want to take all of their suffering away. And that's also incredibly powerful. And imagine it as like a black rumbling smoke in their body. And what you're going to do is, with your breath, you're going to draw all of that from them and imagine it accumulating in front of you, in front of your face, like a black storm cloud rumbling. And just take a few minutes and on your breath, imagine drawing all the suffering and ignorance and selfishness out of this person and letting it accumulate in this cloud. And now, when you imagine every bit of that black smoke, that cloud of suffering, completely leaving that person right in front of you. And it's also powerful, like a storm. And we're going to use our breath, and we're going to use that power of their suffering and ignorance to destroy that little black ball of suffering, of ignorance, of self-cherishing that is in our own heart. And so on the count of 3, breathe that in and let it act like an atomic explosion at your heart, totally destroying both their suffering and your own self-cherishing. 1, 2, 3. And just feel that the little hard ball at your heart's been completely destroyed, like a nuclear explosion in your own heart. And let your body fill with the light and warmth from that, and feel it radiating out from you. And it's touching this person that you've been meditating on. And it's filling their body with warmth and light and every happiness, totally pure. Imagine them feeling that warmth and light and happiness. And then, because you are shining so brightly from your heart, imagine those rays of light go out. And they touch each of us here and beyond, everyone in your town, this country, this world. Just imagine light radiating from you and blessing every living being on countless planets, giving them every happiness. And just sit for 1 minute with that feeling. And who would ever really want to leave that meditation? So I apologize for doing that so quickly. But I hope if you haven't had a teaching on that before, that you at least have some framework to do your own, like, leisurely, luxuriating, getting into it, getting into the other person's suffering and letting what happens naturally happen, which is compassion. And then, use that to destroy your own self-cherishing, and everybody's happy at the end. So I thank you all so much for the last 4 weeks. It's just incredibly meaningful. And I want to dedicate, all of us to dedicate towards the motivation, what we started this with. May those things come to fruition. May all of our teachers have long and healthy lives. May all of our spiritual friends have long and healthy lives. May we achieve all the realizations of the path and be able to help every living being. Thank you so much.